Okay, and what did we go over last week? John chapter 8. More specifically? Well, then you can think about that for next week, because this week we're going to take a hiatus. It's going to be Church History Day again. Last year, you remember, we did a bit of a trivia thing on Easter. And so we're going to do a bit of a trivia thing on what you think was going to come up for this week. No, Easter is not this week, in case anybody was curious about that. What? Lent? It is Lent. March 17th. St. Patty's Day. St. Patrick's Day. Okay, so we're going to do some church history on St. Patrick. And all of you who watched Buck Denver would have gone over people who worship twigs. Right? Was that VeggieTales? I thought it was Buck Denver. Wow. I'm sorry. Was that? You said it was Buck Denver. They said it's VeggieTales. Yeah, I don't know. I remember watching it. I don't remember which one it was. Anyway. Okay, so, St. Patrick. Okay, we're going to go over, when did St. Patrick live approximately? These are going to be tough ones, because you got to know your church history. Was just a second.
Was he around with St. Jerome?
Yes.
Relatively 400.
Around the 400s, right? Dates are very fuzzy with regard to St. Patrick. I'm just going to call him Patrick, because he was a Christian, and therefore he was a saint, just like St. Guy. St. Christopher, patron saint of... That's weird, travel, yeah. That's weird that a guy who has crashed as much as you. That you don't get hurt, so there you go, yeah.
Like if you need a vehicle insurance.
Wow. Anyways, okay, so he was around circa 387 to 465, somewhere in that vicinity. There is not a lot of accurate information as to when exactly he was born. Okay, his death is a little bit more accurate, you might say, but even then we're still a little fuzzy. Okay, so here's a tough one. According to Irish legends, St. Patrick changed his name to Patricius after becoming a priest. What was his name at birth? I bet you nobody knows this. If you do, I'm going to be really impressed.
I bet you Siri knows it.
Siri probably does know it. I don't trust Siri. Okay, so it was Maewyn Succat.
No wonder you changed it.
Yeah, exactly, with a handle like that. That is really, that's legend. There's lots of questions as to that. What does Patrick mean? What's that? Father. Exactly, it's father figure. And so when he became a priest, he became a father figure, Father so-and-so, and so he's changed his name to Patrick. Also, a lot of this stuff is simply legend. Where was he born? Possibly Wales, possibly Scotland. Right? We're not exactly sure where he was born, but we know he wasn't born in Ireland. And he wasn't born on the continent, so we're pretty sure that he was born in either Scotland or Wales. Right. Okay, so moving along. At what age was he abducted? Because he was abducted. What age was he abducted from his hometown? Anybody know? He was a teenager, around probably 16. Right, he was probably around 16 when he was abducted. Who abducted him?
The Irish.
The Irish pirates. That's right. Pirates not of the Caribbean. So he was abducted by Irish pirates and taken to Ireland. All right, you guys are doing fantastic. Where he ate a bunch of potatoes. And what did he do while in Ireland? Was that? Chase the snakes. No. Okay, while he was a slave in Ireland, what did he do? He took care of pigs. See, somebody watched the VeggieTales, Buck Denver, whatever it was. So he took care of pigs. He was a pig herder, right? How many times did he escape?
5.
Nope.
3.
Okay, you're just guessing. That's nice, but it's twice. Right? First time unsuccessfully, second time successfully. And when he escaped, where did he go? To a monastery? Yes, eventually. He escaped from Ireland on a ship and went to probably the continent, probably Gaul, right, which is France. And no, that doesn't mean he died. Sorry, that was a reference to Peter Rabbit movie. So, anyways, okay, so he goes to Gaul, he goes to France, and he goes to a monastery. He is in the monastery, and he has a vision, and what's his vision of?
Snakes.
Snakes. No snakes yet. I will give you the quote. I saw a man coming, as it were, from Ireland. His name was Victoricus, and he carried many letters, and he gave me one of them. I read the heading, The Voice of the Irish. As I began the letter, I imagined that in that moment I heard the voice of those very people who were near the wood of Folclut, which is beside the Western Sea, and they cried out as with one voice, we appeal to you, holy servant boy, to come and walk among us. Okay, so he goes back to Ireland, and he does what? Chase out snakes. Yeah, everybody knows the snake part. Okay. Right. So that is a myth, in case anyone was wondering. There were no snakes in Ireland at that time, so there was no snakes to chase out. Okay, so he goes and he preaches the gospel, obviously, to the Irish, and he uses the shamrock. And what does the shamrock symbolize? The Trinity. Okay, how many leaves does a shamrock have? A shamrock has one leaf with 3 parts, right? A clover is what you're referring to, and that's a 4-leaf clover, which is supposed to be lucky. But he used the shamrock as a symbol of the Trinity, right? And so he preached the gospel to the Irish. Did Patrick bring Christianity to the Irish? They were already saved. Nope was the answer for that one. They were not already saved. What was the religion of the Irish? They were Druids, right? What is that? They worship twigs. They don't. It is a pagan cult. They have many gods, and trees and things were very sacred to them. That's why they say they worship twigs. But they had a pagan religion. There is a neo kind of pagan religion that has sprung up in Britain over the years. It's gained popularity recently. But we don't really know what the Druids believed or how they worshiped. The only recordings that we have of their religion is by Christians. And so that's the only reference point. And so these neo-pagans borrow from the Christian writings, and then they flavor it with all sorts of New Age philosophy and come up with some crazy religion. But Druid religion was the religion of the day, and that was what Patrick came in and preached the gospel to them. But we don't know that Patrick was actually the one to bring Christianity to Ireland. There was in 408 to 431, there was a bishop in Ireland by the name of Palladius, and he was actually appointed by the Pope Celestine at the time, to be the bishop in Ireland. But there was a famous heretic that was also from Ireland that lived from 354 to 418 AD. Anybody know the name of that guy? Nope. My church history class from past years should know, but probably doesn't remember. He was a contemporary of Jerome and Augustine, and his name was Palladius. Palladius was a rabid free willer and a denier of original sin. And the reason why we know he was from Ireland is Jerome references him as from Ireland and said that his head was full of Irish porridge. That's what he says about him. Not a very flattering thing. But so Pelagius was from Ireland and would have been a contemporary possibly of Patrick. So we know that in Roman Britain, Christianity had already come to the Isles, right? And so there was already Christianity in the British Isles at the time. We don't know to what extent it existed in Ireland, right? But when the Roman Empire started to collapse, they pulled out of Britain, and the people that were there prior to British or to Roman rule basically filled in the vacuum, right? And so all of the Roman society in Britain pretty much collapsed. And then you had various invasions from other places like the Saxons and the Jutes, and so you saw, and the Angles, right? So you saw the continent. That was Chris's fault. The Isles were taken over, right? And so a lot of the civilization collapsed and reverted back into being barbarian and a lot of the Christianity collapsed also. But then missionaries were sent to Britain from the continents, and Christianity spread once more. So, who is the patron saint of Ireland? This is also a trick question. A dead guy. Actually, not Guy. There is one girl. Right? So there are three patron saints of Ireland. There is Patrick, Bridget, and Columba. Right? Bridget might have been a contemporary of Patrick. It's a possibility. We learned a little bit about Patrick. Bridget was... she was from the Isles. She actually was raised in a Druid family, and she converted to Christianity and became a wonderful saint, a wonderful example of Christians. Columba. Anybody know who Saint Columba is? There's a Scot back there that is going, oh yeah, of course I do. What's that? Yeah, Christopher Columbus is dead. No. Okay, so Columba, he came after Patrick. So Patrick took the gospel to Ireland, and God blessed him, and he was very effective in Ireland. And Christianity spread like wildfire, and many monasteries, many centers of Christianity were instituted during the time of Patrick. And from those bases, missionaries were sent out into the other isles, right? So Wales and England and Scotland, they sent missionaries there. And there were 12 men who went from Ireland to Scotland. They were called the 12 Apostles of Ireland. And the leader of that group was Columba. And he took Christianity to Scotland and instituted a monastery on an island by the name of Iona. And it was an incredibly important monastery and still exists today. You can still go visit it. It's on an island off the coast of Scotland, and it is a beautiful place. And they spread Christianity throughout Scotland, right? And they instituted, along with the Irish, the Scottish instituted what was called Celtic Christianity. And Celtic Christianity was important from a historical perspective because it was independent of Rome. Now, I say that with the understanding that, okay, there was Christianity in Rome, and its head was the Pope of Rome, or the Bishop of Rome, right? And the Bishop of Rome exerted incredible influence all over Europe and specifically in the Italian peninsula. There was a great center of Christianity in where else? Pardon me? Constantinople. Right. So there was the Patriarch or the Bishop of Constantinople. There were various other bishops in important centers, Jerusalem, Antioch. There was other bishops around. And most people just think of Rome and the East, centered in Constantinople, as being the rivals. But there was also Christianity in other places. And one important center of Christianity was in Britain, where the Celtic form of Christianity existed. And they had slightly different practices, and they had a different way of calculating Easter, the date for Easter. How do we calculate the date for Easter? Yeah, whenever we're told. It's yeah, okay. You're going to have to raise a hand. How do we calculate Easter? It's based on the lunar calendar. Yep. Okay, here we go. It is the first Sunday after the first full moon after the first day of spring. That's when Easter is, right? It is the first Sunday after the first full moon after the first day of spring. And so there was a discrepancy. If you'll remember last year when we talked about Easter, the discrepancy is whether we should follow more of a Jewish way of reckoning the Passover and Easter that way, or whether we should follow this way that we now have. Okay, and obviously we went with this one. The Celtic Christians calculated it different. I can't remember if they followed more of the Jewish calendar, but the fact that they were distinct from Rome and only joined with Rome later on is significant from a historical point of view because it demonstrates that the papacy was not recognized everywhere as the sole authority in Christianity. And that's extremely important because Roman Catholicism will tell you that the Pope has always... Peter instituted the chair in Rome, the cathedra in Rome, and that was the center and primacy of Christianity since the beginning. And so when you see Constantinople, like the East would definitely disagree with that, obviously, and when you see other centers of Christianity, like those in the Celtic areas, you realize that historical claim by the Roman Catholic Church is not true. Now, later on, the Celtic Christians joined with the Latin Christians, and they formed one group, and they adopted the customs of the Latins. But before that, in this early time, in the time of Patrick and Columba and various other Christians in that area, they did not follow Rome. Yes, ma'am. There was war everywhere all the time. So, So if you read, and I don't recommend it, but if you read, what is his name? It's escaping me right now. What's that? History of the British Isles. Who's it by? Yes, who did? The Venerable Bede. Yes, the Venerable Bede wrote a history of of Christianity, basically in Britain, and it is in my opinion, very hard to read and very bad. He puts into it a lot of his own personal opinions and his personal ideas in along with the history. So if you read the History of Christianity by Eusebius of Caesarea, right, it's pretty good. And it reads more like we would think of a modern history, right? It's not exactly like a modern history, thank goodness, because if you read some of the modern history, it's really bad. But Eusebius gives a fairly good account. The Venerable Bede, not so much. And so when you hear about Christian history being full of all sorts of mythology and crazy ideas and all that, they're generally talking about the Venerable Bede, because he had some pretty wacky ideas. But he gives an account of all the various little kingdoms that existed in Britain at the time, and who was a famous person who would have been known to all of you that was one of these kingdoms in Britain. Son of Pendragon, right. Uther Pendragon. King Arthur. Right. He was actually, I think, in the 700s. So this is right around the 400s, 500s, and he was in the 700s, they think. And one of the weird things that you'll get is that you'll get people who deny the Christianity that was very prevalent in Britain at the time of Arthur. And the identity of Arthur is obviously in some question. But Christianity had already spread throughout the British Isles. It was already solidly instituted in the British Isles early on. From, obviously, the 300s, we know that beyond that, Christianity spread like wildfire in Britain, and the place was very much dominated by Christianity by the time of, say, the 1000, right? The year 1000. What happened in 1066? Battle of Hastings. Yes, the Norman conquest of Britain. By the time that the Norman conquest of Britain occurs, everybody just assumed you're Christian, right? Alfred, the guy who was holding Britain, who was an Angle, was a Saxon. He was a Saxon. He was a Christian. Norman from the continent was also a Christian, quote unquote. Many people would dispute. And so the British Isles were all Christian by about 1000. But even at this early time, and the archaeologists have dug up graves that were from around when they think Arthur might have been. When they dig them up, they find all sorts. They find scraps of parchment with scripture verses on it and crosses everywhere. Like it was the dominant religion of the area by the time of King Arthur. And so you see a lot of contemporary films where they paganize Arthur, but in reality he was very much a devout Christian, if he existed, which is, we don't know, right? But I'm going to assume that he did. Okay, so March 17th is the date in which we celebrate St. Patrick's Day, and what is it commemorating? Oh, yes, the Ides of March. Sorry. I'm thinking, that year, not the same at all. Okay, so, yes, it is. Two days after the Ides of March. Those two are not connected, thank you very much. But what is it commemorating? Okay, it is commemorating the death of Patrick. That's what it's commemorating. He died approximately at 78 years old. Okay, so What Catholic holiday does St. Patrick's Day occur during? Lent. Right. What is Lent? What?
40 days of giving up stuff.
Is it a holiday? Yeah, it said holiday, but it's not really a holiday. It's a holy celebration period of time. I don't know what you call it.
Well, you hear a lot about, St. Patrick's Day, bars and stuff like that.
Right. Okay, well, that's interesting. We'll skip to that one. Okay. Even though it is a big drinking day now, St. Paddy's Day used to be a dry holiday. Up until when? Yes, St. Patrick's Day was huge in New England. Okay, but when did it stop being a dry holiday? Because it used to be a holiday that nobody drank on. It was actually in the 1970s. That's how recent it was. Up until then, it was a non-drinking day. And what was closed on St. Patrick's Day? All the pubs. All the pubs were closed on St. Patrick's Day up until about the 1970s. Where was drinking allowed? This was an odd one, I thought. Where was drinking allowed up until the 1970s? Yeah, no, sort of, I guess, because, if you're going to have wine with your communion, then it was allowed in the churches. No, it was at the big national dog show in Ireland was where you were allowed to drink. For some bizarre reason, they were allowed to sell beer at the big national dog show, which was always held on St. Patrick's Day. So, is St. Patrick's Day the biggest drinking day of biggest drinking holiday of the year? Only if you're Irish. Okay, we won't go there. Okay, so no, New Year's Eve, obviously, is the biggest drinking day of the year, and the 4th of July is the second. And St. Paddy's Day only comes in third. Okay, the most popular drink is Guinness, which is disgusting. And in my opinion, it's an opinion thing. What? I have tried Guinness and I don't like it. Okay, so approximately how many pints of Guinness are drank on St. Paddy's Day? 13 million pints, approximately, which is about 6 million liters of Guinness. Okay, corned beef and cabbage. Yeah, my mom went, yay, I love corned beef and cabbage, unlike Guinness Stout. I don't like Guinness Stout. I like corned beef and cabbage. And where does corned beef and cabbage come from? A pot. A nice big pot. It is American. It is American. It was by the Irish immigrants that they came up with corned beef and cabbage because corned beef was cheap, right? So they had corned beef and cabbage, which is absolutely delicious. It's salty like all get out, so it keeps really easily. And so they actually boiled it in like 3 changes of water in order to get the salt out of it enough to make it palatable. And if you know about survival food, anything you have to boil in 3 changes of water is probably not all that good for you. Just saying. Okay, where and when was the first St. Patrick's Day parade ever recorded? What's that? Good guess, but wrong. It was actually in Italy. It was in 1601 in Italy. Wait, no, I am wrong. I'm sorry, I lied to you. It was in a Spanish colony in Florida. So it was in North America. My apologies. It was in North America, but it was in a Spanish colony in Florida, and they had an Irish vicar. So they had an Irish Day parade. When was the first St. Paddy's Day parade in British American colonies? Where was it? Which British American colony had the first? Was that? No, not New York. I would have guessed New York, but it wasn't. It was in Boston. In Boston in 1737. Okay. Staying with the parade. Okay. Where and when was the first St. Patrick's Day parade in Ireland? It was in Dublin. No, it actually wasn't in Dublin. It was in Waterford. Waterford. And when? I know I keep lying to you. It's terrible.
Are you sure you don't write for modern history?
Yeah, I make it up as I go along. Okay, it was in 1903 was the first St. Patrick's Day celebration or parade. It was celebrated before that. It was celebrated for the first time. Just a second. I don't have the first celebration. That's terrible. Okay. What Irish Franciscan invented St. Patrick's Day? Because it was invented by a Franciscan monk. It was Luke Wadding. Store that for no good reason. Okay, what else do we got here? Okay, where is the home of the biggest St. Patrick's Day celebration in South America? Also, very important information you should have.
Brazil.
It's in Buenos Aires. Okay, since 1992, what Japanese city has put on its own St. Patrick's Day parade?
Nagasaki.
Nope. Tokyo. Okay. Any excuse will do. Okay, so let's see here. In 2020, the St. Patrick's Day parade was canceled in New York City for the first time in how many years? Because of what? Because of COVID. And it was the first time in how many years?
100 years.
250 years.
They celebrated even for the Spanish flu?
Yeah.
Wow.
They didn't care. Just COVID. COVID killed the parade. Okay. So the New York City parade has how many marchers in it? 250,000. 250,000 marchers in the St. Patrick's Day parade. No, exactly. We talk about oppressed communities. The Irish were one of the most oppressed communities in North America. Okay, now one little bit of mythological history. What mythological being is associated with St. Patrick's Day? The leprechaun. How do the leprechauns make their gold?
Rainbows.
That is Rumpelstiltskin, actually, that spins. What's that? No. I never knew this. I thought it was interesting in a weird sort of way. They don't sell unicorn horns. Nope. That's why the unicorns are extinct, obviously, because the leprechauns have been stealing their horns and selling them. Okay, I'll let you know. They make shoes for other fairies. That's their job. And they sell them and make their gold and put it into pots, which are at the end of the rainbow. Which? Very tiny shoes. But they're very expensive. They're like kids' shoes, right? They're super pricey. Okay, that was it. That's all I got. Anybody got any questions on St. Patrick or St. Patrick's Day or Columba or Bridget or leprechauns, which I don't know a lot about, but I'll make stuff up. I don't mind. All right, so that's it. Thank you.